It's interesting to mention the destruction of the temple as such a key event. Had that not happened, we probably couldn't date any of these books.
So you've got to understand this dating methodology used by scholars. They assume that if a writer mentions an event that took place in history, that their writing must have taken place after that event. They don't assume that prophecy took place. So this is why biblical scholars date the Gospels after 70 AD, is because the Gospels feature Jesus making predictions about the destruction of the temple. So rather than assume that Jesus was making predictions before the historical event took place, historians assume that the writer wrote in the prediction retroactively to make it look like Jesus was predicting the future. So you've got to understand that about how historians date historical documents. Now keep this in mind, because most, if not all, of the Book of Mormon is prophecy, and so naturally any of the events mentioned in the prophecies are going to be assumed by scholars to be written after those historical events took place. For example, Christopher Columbus, the American Revolution, things like that. All those events being mentioned in the Book of Mormon, according to historians, are going to push the document into the future sometime after those events took place. And that's why you get things like Dan McClellan saying
the data pretty firmly points in the opposite direction of a historical Book of Mormon. So that is why I talk about the Book of Mormon as something that the data indicate it is a product of the 19th century.
Which isn't really shocking. It's to be expected given the tools of his field. I mean, he has no other choice but to use the methodology of his field so that he can still maintain his credentials as an expert in that field.
We know, for example, that the temple cult in Jerusalem was so fundamental to the way Judaism worked. And the Christian sect, from its earliest time, was attempting to replace the temple. That was kind of the whole logic of it. You see this in the book of Hebrews, Hebrews 9, for example. They explain that the point of Jesus, in fact, the reason Jesus had to die, the reason Jesus is resurrected, the reason for the Eucharist, the reason for baptism, this whole Christian system that they invented, that served the function of negating the need for the temple cult anymore.
Notice that he says that Paul is arguing that Christianity replaces the need for the temple, which is going to be interesting considering what he says about Christianity here.
That idea that you could baptize yourself on behalf of a dead person before you, that was a pagan idea. It was a part of the mystery cult. So to see Paul saying just casually that it's a fundamental component of Christianity, he takes it for granted.
So here he says that the Apostle Paul considered baptism for the dead a fundamental part of Christianity, which means without baptism for the dead, there's no Christianity. So then let me ask you, where was it that a person could go to complete baptisms for the dead? You guessed it. The temple. And it's on these 2 points the Book of Mormon is going to save the rest of Christianity, dating and the temple. Wait a minute.